So here's a question that may make some of us Jesus followers uncomfortable, but listen, I believe this is a critical question for all of us to ask and explore. You ready? When it comes to knowing if there's a God, when it comes to knowing what God is like, when it comes to figuring out who God likes, well, does it all really come down to just the Bible says so? In other words, are we really supposed to base everything we believe on a collection of ancient documents that were written by men over a 1,500-year span of time, during which modern science did not exist, and most people in the world were superstitious and they believed in a collection of gods to explain the unexplainable in their world? I mean, think about it. Isn't it just as possible that these people were guessing, that they made this stuff up? Or maybe that they were sincere, but they were sincerely wrong, just like the men who believed Zeus was real and the earth was flat and the sun revolved around the world? Listen, I have some good news for you. Christianity does not come down to just the Bible says so, even though that's what many of us have been told. So if you have a friend who's asking some of those questions, who has some of those doubts, you might want to take a minute and share this Message in Minutes episode with them. And if you have ever had those questions, just lean in for the next few minutes because we're going to tackle them together in our new series we're calling Discovering Jesus. So listen, maybe you grew up in church and you had serious questions about faith, but when you went to ask your pastor or you went to ask the Sunday school teacher how they knew something was true, maybe they just told you, oh, well, because the Bible says so. Or you may have had a Christian friend who talked to you about faith, and you started asking them questions about, well, why do you believe what you believe, and how do you know that's true? And the only answer they gave you was, well, I believe it because the Bible says it. But that probably wasn't a good enough answer for your questions, was it? Maybe you just shrugged and walked away. If that's ever been your experience, or if you've ever had doubts about whether you can be certain all of this really is true, I have great news for you. Christianity is discoverable, examinable, and investigable. Yes, those are words. I double-checked. In other words, you can discover and investigate for yourself the claims of the Christian faith because the validity of the Christian faith does not rise and fall on the accuracy and inerrancy of all 66 documents of the Bible. Now, just to be clear, I believe everything in the Bible is true. But I will also say this. If one of the documents in the Bible were somehow proven to be false tomorrow, my faith would not crumble. You know why? Because the Christian faith rises and falls on a single person. It's Jesus of Nazareth. So whenever you wrestle with doubts, you feel like you're losing your faith, or if you find yourself curious about Christianity, the place you go, the place you start is Jesus. And you ask yourself this simple question. Is Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John a reliable account of actual events of Jesus' life? Now, those are the 4 biographical accounts that document the life of Jesus. And listen, if just one of them is true, it's game on. You should get your faith on and press on. Now, if this is all new information for you and you're a bit confused right now by all this, it is not your fault. It is because of how the Bible was presented to so many of us. So let me take 60 seconds to walk you through how we got our faith and how we got the Bible. This is really important. So there was an event, the resurrection of Jesus. We celebrated that event at Easter, and that event sparked a new movement that was initially called the Way, or a Nazarene sect, but we call it today the church. And immediately after the resurrection happened, and this movement was launched, well, people who were there, people who were a part of everything that was happening, they actually recorded, they wrote down what happened. And this is where we get documents like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and the Acts of the Apostles. An event sparked a movement that led to these documents recording what people had seen and heard and experienced themselves. And it's important to note, all of this happened before 70 AD when the Romans came and destroyed the Jewish temple. So within less than 40 years after Jesus' resurrection, you have these documents. Now, you fast forward 300 years from the time of Jesus, and that's when the Bible as we know it was assembled. So what people did is they took the validated documents that were written in the first century by eyewitnesses of Jesus, and for the first time, they compiled them all together and put them with the Jewish scriptures. Now, here's why that is important. Jesus is not a Bible story. Jesus is why we have the Bible and why we have all the stories. In other words, if there had been no resurrection, there would have been no movement, no church. And if there had been no church, there would have been no one to document anything, which means there would have been no need for a Bible. So the only reason you have a Bible today is because 2,000 years ago, something extraordinary happened. The resurrection started it all. Which means if even one biographical account of the life and resurrection of Jesus is true, then we all need to lean in and pay attention because it's worth taking seriously. So here's what we're going to do for the next few episodes. We're going to explore one of the biographical accounts together, the Gospel of Luke. Now, gospel, you've heard that term thrown around. Gospel just means good news. And Luke is the author of this document. He was not one of Jesus' original disciples, but he knew all the disciples. Luke was a medical doctor who interviewed many of the eyewitnesses to everything Jesus had done. And then he starts his account of Jesus' life this way. He says, many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us. Let me ask you a question. How many is many? Is 4 many? Seems like it'd be more than 4. We don't exactly know how many, but apparently there were a lot of people who wrote down accounts of what they had seen and heard and experienced Jesus do. And if you notice, this does not sound like a fairy tale. Luke doesn't start with, once upon a time. This is not how you would start a fictional account. From the first line, Luke says, I am not the first or the only person to tell you about what Jesus did. There are a lot of other accounts from eyewitnesses. You can check them out. Now, just real quick, let me ask you a question. How many people are going to undertake writing an account of your life? Yeah, not many. Actually, that's not true. Let's take one of those words out and change it. Not any, right? A few generations after we're gone, nobody is going to remember our names. But numerous people wrote accounts of what they saw Jesus do. Now, here's why that's significant. When you go back to ancient times, you discover it was highly unusual to write accounts of anyone's life, even the lives of famous people. And the reason for that is because it was so expensive to write documents. That's why there are no complete works on the life of Tiberius Caesar, who was emperor of Rome when Jesus lived. What we know about him, we've had to piece together from little fragments and documents and writings. There's nothing written about the life of the Roman governor Pontius Pilate. So if that's the case, how many detailed narratives do you think we would have of first century rabbis, Jewish peasants, or crucified criminals? Yeah, there are none of those. And that's what makes Luke's account of Jesus' life, not to mention all the other accounts we have, that's what makes them astounding. They are extremely rare. Nobody else wrote accounts like this, which begs the question, why would Luke do it? Why did so many others do it? There is no explanation other than something extraordinary happened. And not only that, something good happened. Something worth telling the whole world happened. And they felt compelled, no matter what it cost, to tell it. All right, back to Luke. He starts his account this way. Many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us, just as they were handed down to us by those who from the first were eyewitnesses and servants of the word. So Luke's going, okay, I thoroughly examined everything to discover who Jesus is. I interviewed all the players who were there to watch it happen. I talked to Peter, to Andrew, to James, John, to Matthew, to Jesus' brothers, to Jesus' mother Mary. I interviewed everybody because I wanted to compile an accurate account of what took place. And then he writes, with this in mind, since I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning. Now remember, he's going, I'm a medical doctor. Details matter to me. This is not a Bible story. This is something that happened in my lifetime. I talked to all the people who were there and saw it. What I'm telling you, Luke says, is discoverable, examinable, and investigable. And based on what I learned in all of my interviews, with this in mind, since I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning, he writes, I too decided to write an orderly account for you. Now, do not miss this. Luke didn't sit down and write this account thinking he was writing the Bible. The Bible wouldn't be assembled for over 300 years. Luke thought it was important to record everything he had verified that Jesus taught and did, starting with Jesus' birth all the way to his resurrection. So being in the Bible does not make Luke's account valuable or reliable. Luke's account was valuable and reliable because of when it was written, who wrote it, and the eyewitnesses still alive at the time who could verify it. Think of it this way. I've got some valuable things in my safe, but they are not valuable because they're sitting in my safe. They're in the safe because they're valuable. We don't believe Luke's account is valuable and reliable because it's in the Bible. It's the other way around. It is in the Bible because people were certain it was valuable and reliable. This is really great news for all of us who have doubts from time to time, or maybe you're in a situation where you just can't seem to believe yet. Because listen, if you decide Luke is not lying, well, you have new hope and you have new faith. And Luke actually gives us a receipt so we can trust him. Let me read you again what he wrote. With this in mind, since I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning, I too decided to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know the certainty of the things you have been taught. Now, you're probably thinking, who's Theophilus? Well, he is believed to have been a follower of Jesus who had questions, probably a new follower who wanted to verify what he'd been told. So Luke wrote this account to give his friend Theophilus certainty. And he makes it clear that the Christian faith is not about having faith in faith. The Christian faith isn't you just got to believe more kind of faith. The Christian faith, Luke is telling Theophilus, is anchored to Jesus and his resurrection. And that event, remember, launched a movement we call the church that eventually led to the compilation of all the ancient documents we call the Bible, in particular, the New Testament of the Bible. So if you have doubts at times, if you aren't sure you buy all this, if you have moments when you question or you wonder, well, the question you have to answer is Luke lying? I mean, he actually can't be mistaken. He either carefully investigated everything from the beginning or he didn't. And since there is no reason to suggest he didn't, we should lean in and discover the Jesus he wrote about. The good news is this: the origin of Christianity is not a mystery. It is verifiable. So don't throw out your questions. Do not throw away your doubts. You should hold on to all of them. You ought to carry them with you. But while you're doing it, you should explore and discover Jesus for yourself. Because Luke believed what the eyewitnesses told him, that something extraordinary happened that was good for him. It was good for you. It was good for me. It's good for the whole world. So listen, if you choose not to follow Jesus because it is inconvenient to follow him, I 100% get that. If you don't want to follow because it's going to cost you something, well, you are not wrong. But I would also say this: don't refuse to follow Jesus because you don't think he is discoverable, examinable, or investigable. Luke tells us he is. And Luke's about to take us on a journey where we can verify that for ourselves. And we're going to pick it up right there in our next episode.